What if the reason people visit less, talk less, and slowly pull away isn't because they've changed, but because you have, without realizing it? Aging doesn't always show up in wrinkles or gray hair. Sometimes it hides in habits, a careless word, a joke that doesn't land, a conversation that feels more like a lecture than a connection. And the hardest part? No one tells you. Not because they don't care, but because they don't want to hurt you. So instead, they just drift. But what if those habits could be seen? What if they could be softened, even reversed? In this video, we're holding up a mirror, not to judge, but to help you see the quiet things that might be pushing people away. Because once you see them, you can change them. And that small shift, it might just bring the people you love closer than ever before. There comes a moment in life, not marked by a birthday or a milestone, when you sense that people are treating you just a little bit differently. Their hugs are shorter, their visits more brief. They check their phones more during conversations. They smile, they nod. But something's changed, and you can't quite put your finger on it. It's subtle, it's quiet, and worst of all, no one tells you why. That's because what pushes people away in old age often isn't intentional. It's invisible. It lives in habits we've carried for years. Some are protective, others quietly harmful. This isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. Because when you recognize these patterns, you gain the power to do something about them. These 12 behaviors don't make you a bad person, but if you're not aware of them, they can slowly create a distance between you and the people you love. And the truth? That distance hurts a lot more than getting older ever will. Let's begin with the first sign, one of the most unspoken, yet most powerful: neglecting personal hygiene. It doesn't have to be extreme. You're not walking around filthy, but the signs show in small ways. Hair that hasn't been brushed in days, clothes that look lived in instead of clean, a faint body odor that lingers just a second too long. You may not notice it, but others do, especially those who love you most. Take Helen, for instance, a 71-year-old widow who always prided herself on keeping a tidy home. But after her husband passed, her routine started slipping. Not dramatically, but enough that her daughter stopped leaning in for hugs. Her grandson moved a little farther down the couch during visits. It wasn't cruelty, it was confusion, an unspoken discomfort they didn't know how to name. You see, hygiene is more than just grooming. It's the signal we send to the world that we still care about ourselves and those around us. And when it fades, the world unconsciously mirrors that message. It doesn't mean you need to look polished every hour of the day, but clean clothes, brushed hair, and a fresh scent say, I'm still here. I still value connection. I still respect myself and you. Next, we arrive at habit number 2, speaking without a filter. This one is tricky because for years, you may have been praised for your honesty, your bluntness, your willingness to say it like it is. And in many ways, that courage can be a gift. But over time, if that filter wears away completely, truth becomes something else: judgment. Imagine this. Your niece comes over with a new haircut. You frown and say, "That's not really flattering, you know. You didn't mean to be cruel. You were being honest." But your words carried more weight than you realized. And slowly, people start stepping back. Not because they don't love you, but because they don't want to get burned by the heat of your remarks. There's a difference between speaking your truth and swinging it like a hammer. People will always remember how your words made them feel, not how right you were. The gift of age is wisdom, But wisdom without gentleness becomes something people brace for, not run toward. Which brings us to habit number 3. Wearing clothes that no longer fit or reflect who you are today. This isn't about fashion. It's not about trends. It's about presence. Wearing pants 2 sizes too big or a faded shirt from 2 decades ago doesn't say, "I'm comfortable." It says, "I've stopped paying attention." Remember Arthur? A retired accountant who wore the same brown sweater to church every Sunday. So long it had become part of his identity. He thought it was tradition. His granddaughter saw it as a sign that he'd stopped evolving. When she gifted him a new, deep blue sweater that brought out his eyes, his face lit up in the mirror. It wasn't about the sweater. It was about remembering he was still seen. The way we dress isn't vanity. It's a quiet language. It says, "I'm still participating in life." You don't need to dress young. You just need to dress aware. Wear colors that suit your current complexion. Fit your clothes to your frame as it is today, not as it was 15 years ago. When you show the world you care how you show up, the world responds with a little more warmth, curiosity, and respect. Some of the most damaging habits we carry into older age don't come from malice. They come from moments of good intention taken just one step too far. We interrupt not to dominate, but to help. We complain not to annoy, but to connect. And yet, the impact is often the same. People begin to withdraw, not because they've stopped loving us, but because they no longer feel safe in the conversation. Let's start with habit 4. Interrupting or dominating conversations. You're at a family dinner, and someone mentions a problem they're having. Instantly, your mind races with solutions. You've lived through this before. You know what works, and before they even finish, you're already talking. Advice is spilling out. Stories from your past come flooding in. 10 minutes pass, and no one else has spoken. It feels like you're helping. But here's the truth. When we fill all the space, we leave others feeling small, especially younger generations. They come into conversations unsure of their footing already. When we jump in too quickly, we don't guide them. We silence them. Take Ron, for example, a proud grandfather who loved sharing lessons from his life. His adult children began calling less. When they did, conversations were short. One day, his granddaughter finally said, "I just want to talk without being fixed." That hit him. He realized he wasn't being wise. He was being overwhelming. The fix isn't silence, it's space. Let people finish. Ask questions before offering thoughts. When others feel heard, they lean in. And ironically, when you speak less, your words start to carry more weight. Now on to habit 5. Complaining about kids these days. It might start as a joke. Back in my day, we worked for what we had. Or, these kids can't even hold a conversation without a screen. You think you're offering perspective, but what your audience hears is something very different. Judgment. Younger people today are navigating a world you never had to. Economic instability, digital overload, identity questions that didn't exist in your youth. When you lead with criticism, you close the door to connection. They stop opening up. Not because they're thin-skinned, but because they don't want to be misunderstood again. But when you shift from critique to curiosity, everything changes. Say instead, "What's it like growing up in your world today?" That single question transforms distance into dialogue. Now let's talk about habit 6, ignoring modern etiquette. You've seen it. An older man speaking loudly on the phone in a quiet cafe, a video blaring from a tablet in a waiting room, or someone standing too close in line, unaware of the discomfort around them. These aren't bad behaviors, they're blind spots. But today, social rules have changed, and the perception of others matters more than ever. Most people won't say anything. They'll just move away. But silently, they're forming judgments, not about your volume, but about your awareness. And in public, awareness is the new currency of respect. The solution? Observe. See how others act in public spaces. Keep your volume low. Use headphones. Give space. These small acts don't just avoid annoyance. They build silent respect. They say, I may be older, but I'm still present. I still care how I affect others. There's a strange irony in aging. The older we get, the more stories we carry, but the harder it becomes to share them in a way that brings people closer rather than pushes them away. Sometimes, what we think is honesty becomes heaviness. What we think is tradition becomes a burden. And what we think is natural becomes unintentional distance. Let's explore 3 more habits that often appear with the best of intentions, but lead to the opposite of what we really want. Let's begin with habit 7, oversharing medical problems. Now let's be clear. Your health matters. You have every right to speak about it. But when every conversation starts to sound like a doctor's appointment, people begin to pull back. You start noticing shorter visits, fewer calls, conversations that never get beyond polite check-ins. Why? Because when the dominant narrative of your life becomes pain, pills, and procedures, others begin to feel helpless, especially the younger ones. They want to connect, but don't know how to relate. And that sense of disconnection starts to spread. Meet Harold. At 78, he was dealing with chronic back pain, diabetes, and arthritis. He didn't complain to be negative. He just didn't have much else to talk about. But eventually, his grandson stopped visiting. His daughter called less, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't want to be constantly reminded of suffering they couldn't solve. The solution isn't to hide your reality. It's to balance it. Yes, share your health honestly, but don't lead with it. Talk about the bird you spotted outside, the show you just discovered, the thing that made you laugh. Because even when your body feels limited, your life is still rich with small joys that others want to share with you. Now let's turn to habit 8. Being stubborn about outdated beliefs. As the world moves faster, it can feel like your values, once rock solid, are constantly being challenged. Maybe you say things like, "That's just how it is," or "People are too sensitive these days." And deep down, maybe you believe you're right. But here's the hidden cost. The people around you start to withhold. They stop sharing their thoughts. They don't tell you what they're really going through, because they don't want to be dismissed. They want to be understood. Judy, age 81, always stood firm on what she called traditional values. But when her granddaughter came out as bisexual, she brushed it off with a tired joke. That joke built a wall. It took nearly 2 years to bring it down. The point isn't that you need to change all your beliefs. It's that you need to hold them with humility. Be open to learning. Ask questions instead of issuing judgments. Your strength isn't in being immovable. It's in staying engaged. Relevance doesn't come from clinging to the past. It comes from showing that you still care about the present. Lastly, in this section, habit 9, walking or moving without awareness of space. This seems minor until you see its impact. You're at the store, standing in the center of the aisle, reading a label while others struggle to get by. You stop suddenly on a crowded sidewalk, or you drift into someone's path while walking. You're not being rude. You're just moving at your own pace. But to those around you, it can feel like friction. And the truth is, most won't say a word. They'll just walk around you with a sigh or quietly avoid shopping with you next time. It's not about speed. It's about awareness. Being considerate of shared space says, I'm still engaged. I still care how I affect others. Henry, 73, realized this after his daughter gently said, Dad, it's really hard to shop with you sometimes. Not because he was slow, but because he was unaware. He started paying attention, stepping to the side, letting others pass, being present in public. And suddenly, his family enjoyed being out with him again. It's a small shift, but it says so much. Sometimes, it's not what we say or do that leaves the biggest impression. It's how we make others feel. And in old age, the difference between being admired and being quietly avoided often rests in how aware we are of the energy we bring into a room. These final 3 habits may seem harmless at first, but they shape how people, especially the younger generations, remember us. Let's finish strong. Let's begin with habit 10, making jokes that don't age well. Humor is a gift, especially in old age. It lightens tension, builds bridges, and invites others into joy. But like language, humor evolves. What once got laughs in the 70s might now earn silence, discomfort, or even offense. Jokes based on gender, race, stereotypes, or mocking someone's identity, they don't land the same anymore. In fact, they build walls where you meant to build connection. Take Leo, for example. He loved teasing people, especially the younger ones in his family. But after one dinner, his grandson stopped coming around. Not because Leo was mean, but because his harmless jokes weren't harmless anymore. One day, Leo asked why. His grandson replied, I know you mean well, but your jokes feel like punches, not hugs. The solution? Update your humor. Laugh at yourself more. Share stories that spark joy instead of discomfort. And if you're unsure about a joke, don't tell it. The best humor today is rooted in humility and warmth, not edge or ridicule. You don't need to be sharp to be funny. You need to be kind. Now on to habit 11, acting helpless when you're not. This one can sneak up on you. Maybe you say, oh, I don't know how to use that, or you do it for me. And yes, there are things that become harder with age. But when you default to helplessness, even when you're capable, it starts to feel like manipulation, like dependence where there should still be agency, and people notice. Your kids may silently resent having to do things you could try to do. Friends may stop inviting you to activities, assuming you'll opt out anyway. And worst of all, you begin to lose confidence in yourself. Gloria, age 74, had stopped doing basic things around the house. I'm too old to figure out new things, she said. But after some nudging, she tried learning how to use her new phone. It wasn't perfect, but it made her feel powerful. Her granddaughter said, I've never been prouder of you than when you sent me your first emoji. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, but reclaiming your independence, one small action at a time, sends a signal to the world. I may be older, but I'm still in motion. Lastly, habit 12, pretending you're always right. You've earned your experience. You've lived through decades. But here's a hard truth. When the need to be right outweighs the need to connect, people start tuning out. They nod, smile, and stop sharing their ideas, not because they agree, but because they're exhausted. Being right feels good, but being respected feels better. And the fastest way to earn respect? Stay curious. Ask more than you correct. Be willing to say, I never thought of it that way. That kind of humility doesn't weaken your voice. It amplifies it. Because in the end, people don't remember you for how many debates you won. They remember how you made them feel safe to be themselves around you. You've made it through all 12. Now the real question is, what do you do with this awareness? The answer isn't to feel shame. It's to feel empowered. These habits aren't flaws. They're signals. Signals that say, here's where you can grow next. And isn't that the whole point? Not to fade, not to settle, but to grow with grace. Every small shift you make, from listening more to dressing with care to updating your humor, is a way of saying, I'm still here, still evolving, still someone others want to be around. So take inventory, not with fear, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, am I showing up the way I want to be remembered? Because in the end, what makes someone unforgettable isn't perfection. It's presence. It's self-awareness. It's the quiet strength of someone who keeps learning, keeps softening, and keeps choosing kindness over control. That kind of aging doesn't push people away. It pulls them closer. And that's the kind of legacy worth living for.